A homeless veteran was kicked out of his home, then a billionaire young man rescued him only to realize he was his lost father. Snow fell silently across the city streets. People hurried past glowing storefronts carrying shopping bags and hot coffee. Nobody noticed the old man sitting alone near the bus stop. Except when they wanted him gone. His name was Daniel Carter. 63 years old. A homeless veteran. Thin coat. Worn boots. Gray beard covered in snow. And in his trembling hands, a faded military photograph. Daniel quietly stared at the picture every single night. Like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Suddenly, a luxury black SUV stopped beside the sidewalk. The driver's door opened. A sharply dressed real estate businessman stepped out angrily. "Hey! You can't sit here." Daniel slowly looked up. "I'm sorry. I was just resting." The businessman pointed toward the expensive building behind him. "My clients are arriving. They don't want to see homeless people." Several pedestrians stopped to watch. Daniel slowly stood up, struggling from pain in his knees. "I'll leave." But before he could walk away, the businessman kicked Daniel's small backpack into the snow. Personal belongings scattered everywhere. Medicine bottles. Old letters. Military medals. People stared. Some uncomfortable. Some amused. Nobody helped. Then the businessman noticed the military jacket beneath Daniel's coat. He laughed coldly. "You expect sympathy because you were a soldier." Daniel quietly bent down to collect his things. No anger. No argument. Only dignity. And standing across the street, inside another black SUV, a young billionaire watched the entire scene unfold through the window. His name was Ethan Sinclair. 32 years old. Tech billionaire. Famous entrepreneur. Cold in business. Reserved in public. But something about the old veteran stopped him completely. Because when Daniel lifted his face into the falling snow, Ethan felt something strange. Something painfully familiar. What Ethan didn't know yet was that the homeless man being humiliated in the street was about to change his life forever. Daniel slowly limped away carrying his torn backpack. Snow soaked through his shoes. His stomach growled from hunger. But he still stopped to help an elderly woman whose groceries had fallen near the curb. "Careful," Daniel whispered kindly while helping her stand. The woman smiled sadly. "You should be the one getting help." Daniel chuckled softly. "Maybe someday." He continued walking into the freezing night. Alone. Or so he thought. Because Ethan Sinclair quietly followed him from a distance. Something inside the billionaire refused to let the old man disappear. Daniel eventually reached an abandoned shelter beneath a broken highway bridge. Cardboard walls. Blankets soaked from melted snow. A tiny lantern flickering beside him. Ethan stared in disbelief from inside his warm car. "How does someone survive like this?" he whispered. Then Ethan noticed something else. Every homeless person near the shelter greeted Daniel warmly. The veteran shared food. Checked on sick people. Gave away his own blanket to a younger man shivering violently. Even with nothing, he still took care of others. Ethan felt his chest tighten painfully. Because wealthy people had spent years asking him for money. But this homeless veteran had almost nothing. And still gave more than anyone else. The next morning, Ethan returned. This time carrying coffee and food. Daniel looked surprised. "You followed me?" Ethan handed him a warm cup carefully. "I just wanted to help." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's dangerous." "What is?" "Caring about strangers." Ethan sat beside him quietly. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt strangely calm. They talked for hours. Daniel spoke about life. Loss. War. Regret. But never bitterness. Never hatred. Even after everything he endured. Ethan found himself listening like a child hearing wisdom from someone he had needed his entire life. Meanwhile, a hidden truth remained buried for decades. 25 years earlier, Daniel Carter disappeared after exposing military corruption connected to illegal weapons contracts. Powerful men framed him for crimes he never committed. His military benefits were erased. His reputation destroyed. Worst of all, his wife was told Daniel had abandoned the family willingly. Heartbroken and struggling, she later died believing the lie. And their young son was adopted into another family after the system separated them. That child was Ethan Sinclair. But neither of them knew it yet. One evening, Ethan invited Daniel to dinner at a luxury restaurant. The billionaire wanted to help him properly. New clothes. A hotel room. Medical treatment. But the moment they entered the restaurant, everything changed. Guests stared immediately. Whispers spread across the room. Why is a homeless man here? A wealthy investor recognized Ethan instantly. Then looked at Daniel with disgust. Seriously? You brought him here? Daniel immediately stepped back. It's okay, he whispered. I can leave. But Ethan stopped him. No. The investor laughed mockingly. People like him ruin places like this. Daniel lowered his eyes quietly. And then something heartbreaking happened. A young waiter approached Daniel carefully and whispered. Sir, thank you for your service. Daniel looked shocked. The waiter revealed his father had once served in the military with Daniel years earlier. He said you saved his life. The restaurant became silent. The wealthy investor suddenly looked uncomfortable. But Ethan couldn't stop staring at Daniel. Because for the first time, he realized this man carried more honor than everyone else in the room combined. Days later, Ethan secretly hired investigators to learn more about Daniel's past. And what they discovered shocked him completely. The corruption accusations against Daniel had been fabricated. Witnesses were bribed. Evidence was hidden. Military officials buried the truth to protect powerful corporations. Daniel had sacrificed everything trying to expose evil. And society rewarded him with homelessness. Ethan sat alone in his office staring at the report in disbelief. Then his eyes landed on one final page. A faded family record. Missing child, Ethan Carter. Age, 7. Daniel Carter's son. Ethan's hands began trembling violently. No. He checked the dates again. The adoption files. The DNA records. Every detail matched. Tears filled his eyes instantly. The homeless veteran he rescued was his biological father. That night, Ethan drove through the city desperately searching for Daniel. Snowstorms covered the streets. Finally, he found Daniel sitting beneath the bridge sharing soup with another homeless man. Ethan stepped out of the car shaking emotionally. Daniel. The old veteran looked up calmly. Then Ethan whispered the words that changed both their lives forever. You're my father. Silence. The wind howled through the bridge. Daniel stared at him in confusion. What? Ethan dropped the investigation files into his lap with trembling hands. You never abandoned me. Daniel slowly opened the documents. His hands shook harder with every page. Then suddenly, the old veteran broke down crying. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just silent tears from a man who had spent decades carrying unbearable pain alone. My son, he whispered. Ethan collapsed to his knees beside him. And for the first time in his entire life, the billionaire hugged his father. News spread quickly. The homeless veteran who was actually a billionaire's father. The city exploded with reactions. People who ignored Daniel suddenly wanted interviews. The same businessman who humiliated him publicly tried apologizing online. But Daniel refused revenge. Refused lawsuits. Refused hatred. When reporters asked why, he answered simply. Pain should end somewhere. That sentence spread across the country. Millions repeated it online. Because somehow, the homeless veteran understood humanity better than the wealthy people who mocked him. Weeks later, Ethan held a massive press conference. Executives, journalists, politicians, military officials, all gathered inside a grand ballroom. And when the doors opened, Daniel Carter entered wearing a clean tailored suit for the first time in decades. The room stood in silence. Some people cried immediately. Others lowered their heads in shame. Ethan walked onto the stage beside his father proudly. Then revealed the full corruption scandal publicly. Hidden military contracts. False accusations. Destroyed lives. The powerful men responsible were arrested within days. But Daniel never celebrated their downfall. Instead, he asked for something unexpected. Funding for homeless veterans. Mental health care. Housing programs. Food centers. Too many heroes were forgotten, he said softly. The ballroom erupted into applause. Months later, a new veterans housing community opened across the city. Warm apartments. Medical support. Counseling. Hope. At the entrance stood a bronze plaque. The Daniel Carter Foundation, no hero should be left behind. Daniel stared at the sign emotionally. You didn't have to do all this, he told Ethan. Ethan smiled warmly. Yes, I did. Then he looked at his father quietly. You spent your whole life protecting people. His voice cracked slightly. Now it's my turn. Daniel's eyes filled with tears again. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. One evening, father and son sat together outside the new Veterans Center watching the sunset. Children laughed nearby. Snow melted slowly from the sidewalks. Peace finally felt real. Daniel pulled the old military photograph from his pocket again. But this time, he handed it to Ethan. You keep it now. Ethan stared at the photo emotionally. Then asked softly. After everything, how did you stay kind? Daniel smiled gently. Because if suffering turns you cruel. He looked toward the shelter behind them. Then suffering wins. Ethan nodded slowly. And for the first time in decades, neither of them felt lost anymore.